Joe, welcome aboard here. You wrote a good story today basically saying who knows on these managers. I thought Luis Rojas was going to be, the next Miller Huggins. Didn't quite work out that way. Maybe Mendoza will. But the point is, could the Mets overpaid more than 40 to get Counsell, and should they have? And right now, if you had a season for your life, do you want Mendoza managing your team or Buck Showalter managing your team? Let me hear your thoughts on that. Go ahead.
So let's take them one at a time. I think Craig Counsell, once he could get both things he wanted, which was the money, 5 years at $40 million, he wanted it for himself. I do think he's a guy. He was very big in the Players Association as a player to make sure that players earned what they deserved. I think he wanted to take manager pay back up to a level we haven't seen since kind of the Mike Scioscia, Joe Torre era for commitment in years and dollars per year. And I think he's done that here. And I think once he was able to do that and get the Midwest, right? He has two sons who play college baseball in the Big Ten. He has two daughters in high school in Wisconsin. He was able to get the money and the location. Steve Cohen could do a lot of things. He can't put New York in the Midwest. And I think he couldn't win the geography game. And as far as who I want managing in 2024, yes, if the Mets were only playing one season under David Stearns, I think the answer there is Buck Showalter. I think the concern by David Stearns was if he brings Buck Showalter back and the Mets have a good year, but he doesn't particularly like how Buck goes around about things, can he actually make the change a year from now? He was starting a new administration. I think he wanted to start it fresh. And look, Carlos Mendoza has interviewed in a lot of places. The grades are very good on him when he interviews. To know Carlos Mendoza is to like Carlos Mendoza. He's really a terrific guy. And if you think about it, he's kind of come up the way that Buck Showalter did. A lot of guys who get managing jobs. Stephen Vogt got a job in Cleveland. He was a coach for a year. He'd been a player 2 years ago. Carlos Mendoza has managed in the minor leagues. He's managed winter ball. He managed in the AFL. He managed in the WBC. He has a lot of experience in a traditional way to how you used to get one of these jobs. So obviously these are all gambles, but there is a track record that he has led a team besides being on the bench the last 4 years as Aaron Boone's bench coach.
What have the Yankees done in the last 4 years to make me think the bench coach is that active? They never beat Houston. They can't hit in the postseason. And this year they're coming off an awful year that the GM said is an absolute catastrophe. So why, in fact, does the bench coach in that team get a big job with the Mets? I don't understand.
Well, quality control coach in Seattle that's made the playoffs one time since 2001 just got a job managing in Cleveland. So, I'll say this, Chris. Let's answer in a macro way. When I talk to people now in the game, they talk about how hard it is to pick managers. Managers are like the pool is, we're not asking managers to manage in a traditional way in the minor leagues anymore. Winning is out. It's all about development. It's hard to decide who will be good at these jobs. And if I were just looking at a microwave, the Yankees have made a lot of mistakes to explain the last few years and not making the playoffs. And I don't know that any of those mistakes were Carlos Mendoza's fault.
All right, did Dave Ross get a lousy deal here as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, I think, like it's one thing if you told me David Ross had served the Cubs poorly or embarrassed them, but the way I've heard it is he was doing Cubs business yesterday morning, and he was like he learned with the rest of us to some degree that he was out as manager. We've seen this before with the Cubs, right? It happened with Renteria when they went to Joe Madden after it seemed that they had committed to Renteria. There's a saying, if you're thinking about getting a divorce, you should probably get a divorce. If the Cubs were even thinking that if the right guy came along, they'd move on from David Ross, maybe they should have fired Ross at the end of the season. That would have felt more traditional than kind of on November 6th to surprise him with this. They did go to the pretty much the top of the field. You know, Craig Counsell's a finalist for National League Manager of the Year. I think he's finished second 3 times. I think he's generally thought of as a guy who does more with less than just about anybody else. They certainly know him from the division as they're watching him do more with less. So, like in the case of Joe Maddon, who already had proven so much, they went for the proven guy at a time where they probably want to kind of push the brick on the gas pedal and try to do some winning, which they haven't done in a while.
All right, so in other words, Madden and Renneria, maybe a little similarity. I think Ross got a bad deal. I think you probably feel the same way, too. And the one thing about Counsell, before we put him in the Hall of Fame, you mentioned it today, he's 1-9 in his last 10 playoff games. And let's face it, Joel, the NL Central, if you want to be a manager with a chance to win, it's the right division. Because the Reds never win, the Pirates never win, Cardinals don't spend $400 million on payroll, and the Cubs have really lowered the payroll a lot since they last won. So it is relative. It's a lot easier to be successful as a manager in the NL Central than it would be, say, in the NL East. So does that maybe explain some of Counsell's success? What's your take with that?
I think Craig Counsell is a very good major league manager. And I agree with you that he just moved up a couple of weight classes from like flyweight to at least junior heavyweight, if not heavyweight, by going to the Cubs, though it's the same division. He'll have to deal with probably a lot larger media contingent, a lot larger expectations, and a lot more questions. And we'll see. Clearly in New York, it would have been full heavyweight, and he decided not to come here for the full heavyweight, or there, I'm in Arizona, for the full heavyweight experience.
All right, and lastly, who is going to manage we have a couple of these jobs left. You know, San Diego, Milwaukee. Give me a couple of headliners there before we go. Go ahead.
You know, I am interested. Like, I felt like when the Mets let go Buck Showalter, it was the 5th place he's been. I thought that was probably it for him. Maybe he's got a chance with the Angels. It has felt all along like Mike Shildt is the front runner in San Diego and Ryan Flaherty is the other person seriously being considered there. But I've learned, and if it needed to be relearned, Chris, yesterday we were all walloped by the Craig Counsell news. That didn't leak. It came out of no place. We could all pretend like we have the greatest sources in the world. When teams are good at keeping things silent, and many of them are better today than they've ever been, we could be surprised. So I wouldn't take your money or my money and go to Vegas and bet on anyone for any of these jobs.
Excellent job, Joe. Well done, all the work you've done. Appreciate a few minutes here today. Thanks very much.